From the beautiful Finger Lakes region of upstate New York, this is the Dental Lighthouse Podcast. We take questions from anyone in the dental profession and discuss what it takes to win not only in dentistry, but in life. Business, leadership, relationships, parenting, health and wellness, money management, nothing is off limits on the Dental Lighthouse Podcast. I'm Jason Tenori, your host, and have over 20 years of experience to pull from. Learn from my mistakes and let me help you collapse time so you can become the best version of yourself. Hey guys, before rolling into this conversation, I just wanted to give you some context to it. This is a conversation with one of my best friends, Dr. Addison Killeen. Addison is a fellow black belt coach with me. He has a thriving practice in Lincoln, Nebraska, has a wonderful daily podcast called the Daily Dental Podcast. I would strongly encourage you to subscribe to it. And just an all-around great dude, someone that I try to emulate, someone that is a role model for me. And in this conversation, we talk about a lot of different things from, goals, vision. The last time that Addison and I were together a month or two ago, and just trying to get clarity on what we're all trying to do in this life, and just how important it is to really understand where you want to go and then just work like hell to get there. So I hope you enjoy this conversation. Like I said, Addison is just a lighthouse for me. I would encourage you to check out his content. He's got a couple of really, really great books on Amazon, one of which I was able to be a small part of, but just really great content and just a real dude that just understands what it is to run and own a successful dental practice. So I hope you enjoy.
All right. Well, we're just going to have another weekend conversation on the Daily Dental Podcast here. I got my good friend and fellow dental coach, Dr. Jason Tenori. Jason, thanks for coming on and spending a little Friday afternoon time with me. So everyone that listens to my podcast should know who you are, but for those like two that might not, tell me a little bit, just remind everyone a little bit about yourself.
So do they know about me for the right reasons, or are you telling bad stories?
Infamy and famous are very close.
Right. Well, not a whole lot to tell. I'm touching upon 50 years old, which is in of itself a little frightening, but been happily married for 25 years. I have 5 amazing children. I run a group practice in upstate New York in the Finger Lakes, Rochester, New York area. Started as one location de novo. We've grown it to 7 locations, full-time lab, offsite lab, 150 employees, 20 doctors. And I love it. I just trying to figure out every day how to become a little bit better. I love coaching. I do some coaching through DSI. I do some coaching through a company I started called the Dental Lighthouse. And then over the last 6 months, I started a podcast where copying everything that Dave Ramsey does, because he's one of my inspirations. Just have dentists call in and share some pain points, and we try to unpack some solutions. And I feel like those conversations are really, really awesome for the caller, but more importantly, I think it touches a lot of people who are dealing with similar pain points. Because at the end of the day, business is business, and it's all about people, and it's all about relationships. And if there's a few people out there that can hear some of these conversations, I think just more people are going to benefit. So that's the elevator pitch for me.
Great. Yeah. Well, you hit on a lot of points, and I think I think anyone would say that you've done it the right way and you've grown well. But I kind of sometimes when people, they say like, "Oh, I want to be like Jason Tenori. I want to get to your level." So take us through, your first few years. Did you immediately? I mean, you're at 7 locations now. How many years was it before you started thinking of the multiple game, or what was your early career? What did you focus on? Did you always know you wanted to become a multiple practice owner, or was that an awakening moment for you?
Yeah, super good question. No, I have absolutely no clarity with what I wanted to do. Really even going into dental school, much less after dental school. But I was a type A type person. I worked for a guy about a half hour away for like 3 months, and instantly I thought to myself, man, I could do this better than he's doing. And I had way too much ego back then. But so my wife and I started a practice from scratch, um, and just tried to survive, right? Just tried to figure it out. And it was more about the business than it was about, you know, clinical dentistry. The clinical dentistry was hard for sure because I was so young, but the really hard part was figuring out, customer service and systems and how to manage employees and stuff like that. So we did that for probably about 10 years, and I had what you would probably describe more as a lifestyle practice, right? So I became a pretty productive clinician, took tons of CE. In fact, my wife and I had a deal that I'd be gone at least 2 weekends a month for the first 5 years, just trying to manage expectations with her. And it was hard. It was really, really hard, especially because I had two kids that were under 5 at the time. But that dedication to CE allowed us to really just be super productive out of a 5 or 6 op, one doctor, three hygienist practice. So we were routinely doing $2.5, $3 million, um, with a team of like 8 people. And it was great. Brought home a lot of money. But then you start to get the itch of, I could probably serve more people if I had more employees. And then you start to come to the realization that this place is solely dependent on me. And when I go away for a couple weeks, it's really difficult to navigate. And maybe I should start to introduce some additional providers. And then it just kind of snowballed from there with more associates and other locations. And then the entrepreneur in me started to think like, oh, I could serve that market. I could serve that market. Or for us, it was like, well, we have, 15% of our patient pool coming from that town, which is 45 minutes away. What if we opened up an office there? And so that's kind of how it came to fruition.
Yeah. So how many years did you work in one location then, in your what we all call our flagship practice?
Yeah, probably close to 10. Yeah, I would say what you're right to, yeah, probably close to 10. And then that flagship office was, like everybody, it was 2 ops at first, and then it was 4 ops, and then it was 7. And currently that office is, I think, 18 or 19 ops. And then it just, you know the drill.
Yeah.
It just kind of, snowballs from there. And then
Construction project after construction project,
yeah,
right?
yeah. You wake up one day, you're super excited, and then you wake up the next day, you're like, "What am I doing here?" And it's just like,
Yeah.
so
You
it's just,
you're in the lab creating Frankenstein, and then you wake up next to Frankenstein, and you're like, "Oh my God, what did I create?"
yeah, no question, absolutely no question. So, but
Now,
that's part of what I love about being an entrepreneur. Like you make your own bed. So,
yeah, and you're always learning. Now, if you were speaking to your 1 year out of school self, um, would you still tell folks in your position at that time, still double down on clinical CE? Or what balance, if you had to assign percentages, would you say, oh, take business or communication or leadership type CE stuff?
yeah, super good question. I think one of the best ways to become productive right out of the gate is to have an expanded skill set. And I don't necessarily mean like all on X stuff, but if you're a new practice and a new provider, you need to be able to do endo in a efficient manner. You need to be able to take a tooth out atraumatically. You need to be able to take a tooth out, put an implant in, like in an upper premolar or predictable cases. Um, Ideally, you need to be able to take out partial bony wisdom teeth. So when you can do those things, and you're in a market where other dentists aren't doing them, I think you're going to be busy despite yourself, despite your inability to communicate if you struggle to communicate, despite your inability to be a good entrepreneur, a good owner, a good leader. But you do definitely get to a ceiling of complexity where you need to understand what emotional intelligence is and how to best leverage it. You need to understand how to lead people as you grow an organization. So that's a very long-winded answer to your question of if I had to do it over again, I would probably place as much of an emphasis on the clinical skill set, let's say 80% of my CE, and then 20% of my CE or 20% of my time with reading books would be more so entrepreneurial based, like the E-Myths of the world, the extreme ownerships of the world, the um, Cialdini books, stuff like that, where I could try to get a little bit more dialed in on the self-awareness side, the smart side, as Lencioni says.
Totally. Well, I think that kind of it makes me think of when associates or just younger doctors in general, when they have more competence around their clinical procedures, it breeds confidence. And even, yeah, like you said, if even if they kind of screw up the building of the relationship side or anything, if the doctor is confident in what they're talking about, the patient feels it. And so, and then you get better treatment outcomes, higher acceptance rates, and patients just will trust you more. So yeah,
Yeah,
you brought up
100%.
a couple books. What are you reading right now?
So I have gone down a Alex, this is Hormezi,
Yeah,
um,
Hormozy. Yeah,
Hormozi. I've gone down like a rabbit hole with him where I cannot stop consuming his content. Over the last 2 weeks, I've read all of his books. He's got three, so and they're quick reads. So I've read all of his books. I tell myself I need to watch at least one YouTube video a day on him. And I think what sold it for me, I don't know if you've ever seen him online, but he wears black shorts, a tank top, and a flannel and a hat. Like literally, that's what he wears every day. So it's like the Steve Jobs, like t as you know, Steve Jobs tried to get rid of decision fatigue, so he would wear black pants and a black t-shirt every single day. Well, Hormezy does it kind of for the same reasons, but he makes the argument that if I want to go to the gym, I take off my flannel and I'm ready to go to the gym. If I want to go out to dinner, I put on my flannel and I'm ready to go out to It's just so funny, so funny. And I'm like so resonating with this guy because I literally wear black Under Armour shorts and a t-shirt and a hat every single day. Now I don't practice clinically anymore, but if I'm doing one-on-ones, if I'm interviewing doctors, if I'm at a meeting with my banker, I'm wearing the same thing every single day for those similar reasons. So that's how I first started resonating with him. But I just love his principles. I love how he uh, how he tries to gain market share. It's just a fresh take for me that I'm excited to kind of explore his content. So that's what I'm currently reading right now.
yeah. I've only seen a couple of his videos, but I think it's he makes it really interesting and intriguing when you just see as he explains different business models. You know, just the educational aspect of okay, we're going to break down how this business went from A to Z. And that was kind of I've only seen maybe two or three of his videos and his pitches, but it reminds me of back when I was working at the restaurant industry, and we would get, you know, inundated with like weird offers, like, oh, this golf course is going bankrupt. Do you want to buy the golf course and buy the note from the bank? It's like I don't know jack squat about a golf course, but I will learn and
Yeah,
then see. It's just it's interesting, like you say, business is business is business. And
yeah,
so,
yeah.
but it's interesting to see different takes, different strategies, tactics, and yeah.
It's funny.
Um,
He's got this formula for he calls it value, where it's basically the desired outcome um, plus the predictability of getting to that, right? So if you can raise those, then the value goes up. And then on the denominator side, it's how quickly can we get there and how much friction is going to be involved in the process. And obviously, if you can decrease those and ultimately get it down to zero, then the value infinitely increases. So from his argument is, um, yes, people make the argument that price has a role in dictating value, but the reality is it's these other four drivers that really kind of move the needle. So I think about that even from like an all on X perspective. So we, as I know you do, we have a great partner, junior partner, that's just killing it from an all on X perspective. She's doing, 3, 4 arches a week, and she's really, really good at what she's doing. And she could probably be charging more than what she's currently charging. And as I try to convince her to possibly charge more, I think about those four drivers and like, can you, from a denominator perspective, can you make the timeline um, extremely predictable? Can you look a patient in the face and be like, okay, it's going to be 4 appointments over 3 months and you'll be done? And the reason I know that is because I have 100 other cases where it's gone exactly that way. I think if you can tell a patient that predictably, then they're willing to pay a premium for that service versus like, well, is this going to take 6 months? Is it going to take 9 months? So that's why I'm kind of taking a deep dive on his content because um, I do believe that dentists kind of get sucked into this mindset of, racing to the bottom from a fee perspective. And don't get me wrong, there's people that will value you only based on fee, but you got to ask yourself, is that really who I want? Um, and if there's other ways to charge a more of a fair fee, but I have to deliver a different level of care or service, like let's start to investigate that.
Yeah, that's super interesting. So, now you started the Dental Lighthouse podcast about what 6 months ago now,
Yeah,
and obviously, I mean, you still consume a lot of content both for personal enjoyment, but also you probably use a lot of this as you're spitting out new episodes, whether it's just yourself talking or coaching. Is that right?
100%.
What's been your most popular episode so far?
It's a good question. I'd have to look it up. I'm so new to this. I'm like even now starting to figure out like the logistics of the podcast data and stuff like that. I'm just so ignorant. I was on the phone with a mutual friend, Paul Etchinson, and he's got a podcast, Practice Dental Hero, I think it's called. So he just called me out of the blue and we were talking and he's like, yeah, so what's your variable data, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I don't know. Like, where do you even get that information? So he's
Yeah.
like, how do you not know? How do you not know that? And I'm like, dude, I just hit record. In fact, like,
Mm.
I'll show you this. Well, I know your listeners won't be able to see this, but like, I was given like this and like this thing here. And like, I'm like, yeah, I guess I'm supposed to use this. So I started using it for the first few episodes. And I'm like, can't I just use my AirPods? Like, so
Yeah.
it's just so much easier. Like, I don't need all that stuff. Like, I was on a podcast yesterday with Mark Costas, and he's got the whole, silent
Yeah.
room. And I'm in my kitchen with the dogs barking, like in the background. I'm just like, sorry, dude, I'm just not up to this level yet,
Yeah.
but like it's good enough for me. So anyways, to answer your question, some of the episodes that get a ton of traction typically deal with associates, right? Like how to onboard an associate, how to help an underproducing associate. I just recorded a brain dump on different ways to retain associates, so I know that'll get a lot of play, but typically around that pain point because no one ever taught us in dental school how to hire hygienists and assistants, much less equals, right?
Yeah.
And how to vet them and how to make contract offerings to them and how to onboard them, and then no one taught us how to manage the relationship, you know, down the road. And So I think that content is very interesting to a lot of listeners.
Yeah. No, totally. I mean, that's something, you kind of mentioned at the outset of the episode, you've been married 25 years and you're wearing the hat. I have the
Yeah.
same hat upstairs in my closet. And so we went to North Carolina to celebrate you and Kara's 25th anniversary, which is what, right at the end of the last month. Was that a week or two ago? Yeah.
Yeah, and end of
Was it
July
August?
and into a few days of
Oh,
August. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So, the but when we were out there, we were talking about associates and kind of that was obviously a major topic. Um, and the hiring the associates allowed you, and I think this transition mostly happened sequentially over the last like 4 years. But what did you learn the most as you started to transition out of the clinical chair as a primary clinician and transition into the CEO role? Like, what did you learn, or maybe what was the toughest part for you as you cut clinical time?
Yeah, super good question. So, as you know, the biggest slap in the face to people that start to bring on associates and start to phase out is um, only every single time a decrease in income. And people don't really realize that as you phase out of clinical practice and bring on associates, your income is going to take a hit. Now you can proactively try to do things to make the hit smaller. And then obviously you can get to the point where you have enough associates and you have enough profitability in the organization to equal what you were making and then ultimately increase what you were making. But I don't think docs realize that it's a very fluid situation where you're going to lose money early on if your ultimate goal is to get this person up and running and get them successful. Because we as clinicians have the most income potential with our own hands. Um, Now, we've gotten to the point from a scaling perspective where I've been able to supplement my income based on the size that we have, and I don't practice anymore clinically. But I think that's a very awakening moment for people in my situation, or at least that are trying to do that. Is that something that you personally experienced when you were in that position?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, anytime you drop a day, you generally, you go from 5 days to 2 days. Yeah, you're going to see a pretty usual lockstep in decrease in your W-2 income. And then there's usually a pucker moment, as I
Right.
call it. It's like, oh man, I didn't make the right call. It could still be the right call if that's your long-term vision is to build an organization that's not based around you. Um, but it's also, I think from a social perspective, it's really tough because, as the one of the older doctors in the practice, the founder doctor in your position, patients want to see you. And it's really
Right.
tough to say, I'm sorry, I just don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
You know, and that's a tough conversation and it's a lot of training. And it's a weird position to be in to say, well, I'm a dentist, but I don't really do that anymore. Um,
Yeah.
I kind of joked the other day. I think when I get near to retirement, I'm only going to do crowns and root canals on number four because I'm a right-handed person. So I'm just
Right. Right.
like, yeah, I do four, maybe five, maybe six, but I don't cross over seven. I don't
Right.
do lower mullet. I'm just,
Thank you. That wraps up another episode of the Dental Lighthouse Podcast. You have a choice today. Choose to be a lighthouse. Lighthouses are powerful and steadfast. They are beacons of light for others to reference when life gets turbulent. Go out into the world today and become a lighthouse for someone. Give more than you get. True joy comes from serving others. Start today. I'm Jason Tenori, your host. Thank you for listening to the Dental Lighthouse Podcast. For more information, podcast show notes, or links to anything that we have discussed today, please check out our website, thedentallighthouse.com. We would love to hear from you. If you would like to get on the show, please email us at podcast@thedentallighthouse.com.